All right, so today's speaker is Emily Lacoste. Emily is Suncoast Searchlight's executive editor-in-chief and oversees the newsroom's editorial strategy and day-to-day operations. Emily comes to Suncoast Searchlight from USA Today, where she spent 5 years as an investigative reporter and editor, producing and overseeing some of the news organization's most ambitious work. Prior to USA Today, Emily led Gatehouse Media's National Data and Investigations team, which published its work throughout the country. She also previously served as Deputy Investigations Editor of the Sarasota Herald Tribune, where she was part of the award-winning Bias on the Bench series. Her work over the years has won multiple state, regional, and national awards, including the Robert F. Kennedy Journalism Award, Society of Professional Journalism's Cigna Delta Chi Award, and the National Headliner Award. Emily and her family have lived in Sarasota since 2015. Please help me welcome Emily.
Hi, thank you all so much. So, can you guys hear me okay? All right, great. So, as John said, I am the executive editor-in-chief of Suncoast Searchlight. We are a new nonprofit newsroom, new as in we just started publishing last year in February, so February 21st to be exact, not that I'm counting, but I am. And so we're almost have a full year under our belt. Our mission, I won't read it verbatim, but we basically do in-depth accountability, watchdog, and investigative journalism, serving Sarasota, Manatee, and DeSoto counties. So we don't cover breaking news or ribbon cuttings. We really try to do those deeper dive stories, and we do that specifically so that we're not stepping on existing media organizations' toes. We have a lot of great media organizations in this 3-county region, the Bradenton Herald being one of them, Sarasota Herald Tribune. And so we sort of let them cover what is happening, and then we try to come in and cover why is it happening, how is it happening, and ask those deeper questions. I like to say that this is the kind of journalism that you used to typically find in your Sunday newspaper, but as the industry has suffered a series of cuts over the past few decades, those stories typically are absent or are few and far between, and so that is what we're trying to achieve. We are a very small team. This is literally it. And in fact, one of those people just took a job as an editor at another newsroom. So we are hiring her replacement. It's me, it's a development director, and right now 3 reporters, but we're hiring 2 additional reporters. And so I wish I had triple the staff because there is a lot that is going on here in the community. And we're just trying to make the best use of our resources as possible. We make our news available to all of these outlets. In fact, anybody who wants to publish our work is free to publish our work. We do not put our stories behind a paywall. Everything we produce goes right on our website and in a free newsletter that we send out every Friday. We will never ask for money. You'll never have to sign up for it. If you want the newsletter, you have to sign up, but it's free and it only comes out once a week. You may have seen our stories already and just not even realized it was us because you heard it on WUSF, or you read it in the Bradenton Herald, or you heard our reporters actually convert our stories into radio scripts and read them and give recordings to Johannes, who puts them on the news program at WSLR Radio. So we are sort of all over the place, and that is part of our mission, is to produce news that can serve the entire media ecosystem and give them some really great content that they can pass along to their readership. Some of the stories that we've produced in our first year, one of the first stories out of the gate was one about the so-called rent-a-cow loophole, which is where the state government gives really great tax breaks to people who own agricultural land. But of course, developers have figured out, if they buy agricultural land and just put a few cows on it while they're waiting to develop it, they too can take advantage of this tax break. And so we analyzed agricultural land held by the area's biggest developers to determine that they were saving millions of dollars not going into our county coffers, even though they know and the county knows and everybody knows that the cows there today won't be there tomorrow because that land has already been approved for vast development. And so this is not a ding, by the way, on the developers. If there was a loophole that I put a goat in my backyard and I could pay $7 a year in taxes, there would be a goat in my backyard right now. But it was more to highlight this glaring loophole and gently nudge the powers to be to close it, which I don't think they're going to close it anytime soon. We've done a lot of reporting on New College. That was one area before we launched, I spent a lot of time talking to community stakeholders and editors of various newsrooms, and I asked, hey, what are some of the issues that you feel like aren't getting enough coverage or aren't getting enough deep coverage? And New College came up a lot. And so we've spent a lot of time digging into New College and doing stories about New College. Development was another issue that came up. Please do something right about development and how it is changing our landscape and how developers might be getting special tax breaks. And so we've done a big series on community development districts. So Lakewood Ranch is an example of a community development district where developers will get approval to basically create these districts that almost give them the power of a municipality, and they can take out municipal bonds to fund their developments, and anybody buying into these developments then are paying back those bonds in the form of tax assessments every year. And a lot of people buying into these neighborhoods don't necessarily realize that that is what is happening, or the fact that developers still have control over those developments long after they're built out, and in fact can continue taking out new bonds to do new things there that they then are having to pay back. And so we did a lot of data analysis to show that in certain of these community development districts, the tax assessments that homeowners pay to pay back the developers' bonds are like double or triple how much they're paying just for general fund services to their actual governments. So it's really interesting stuff that kind of blew my mind. I didn't realize this. We also do a lot of collaboration. So we've done a lot of projects with the Bradenton Herald, including this one that we did in December, I believe. If you've been paying attention to the news, I'm sure you too have realized that every week there seems to be another Manatee County teacher or staffer accused of sexual misconduct. And after a certain number of them, we started thinking maybe we should dig into why this seems to be happening so often, and especially in Manatee County. So we teamed up with the Bradenton Herald and spent about 4 months requesting public records, going into personnel files, doing interviews. And what we found was that Manatee County had missed certain red flags in the hiring process for several of these people and had overlooked troubling behavior from some of these people that then later snowballed into full-on misconduct and abuse. And what we also learned was that there's a lot of like these boundary pushings, which reminded me of, we did a lot of investigating sexual misconduct on college campuses when I was at USA Today, and something that I heard again and again was that most predators will go right up to the line where it's like you feel weird, but it wasn't a total boundary crossing, so you kind of don't say anything, and then they do it again and again, and they just push it like just enough where you're like, I don't feel good, but I'm not going to complain about it. And then before you know it, it's real deep. And so some of the same patterns had surfaced here at the school level. So we did this investigation, and the school district was, really great about working with us and being forthcoming. And Superintendent Breslin has shared the story with key stakeholders in the community, and they've implemented some new trainings as a result of that. We also did an investigation with Florida Trident last summer into a series of failures on the part of Sarasota County leading up to and during Tropical Storm Debbie that caused widespread flooding throughout Sarasota County, and that some of that flooding might have occurred anyway, but it certainly was exacerbated as a result of those failures within the government. And as a result of that story, the county fast-tracked the creation of a standalone stormwater department, appointed a new stormwater director, and an assistant county administrator stepped down in the wake of that, of our reporting as well. Did a story about the, declining vaccination rate among kindergarten students, and thought this was going to be a pretty easy story, that we would have pediatricians willing to tell us how shocking it was and how dangerous it was. And we couldn't get a pediatrician to talk to us for like 4 months. And so what we found was that they were terrified of speaking out about the importance of vaccines. And so the story turned into one that kind of did two things. It talked about our declining vaccination rate and the fear that was permeating the medical community and silencing pediatricians and physicians because they were afraid if they spoke out and talked about the importance of vaccines that Florida Surgeon General Lapido would come after them. We've done a lot of reporting on immigration as well, although we haven't seen the raids here like what you might have seen. Certainly probably are paying attention to what's happening in Minneapolis or Chicago or some of these other places. We have had quite a bit of immigration enforcement, but here it seems to happen through sheriff's departments and jails. And so this was a story where we realized that people picked up on low-level traffic offenses were being taken to the county jail, and then ICE can put a hold on them. And so as soon as they're released from county jail, ICE can take them and proceed with deportation. But what the families don't know is that is all happening. And so families are given the option to bond out their loved ones, which then they do, only to see their loved ones immediately taken. And so they pay the price for freedom only to hasten the deportation process. Meanwhile, the bondsman still has to go after them for the remainder of the bond because technically that person has skipped bond. And the courts continue to send them failure to appear letters because nobody's talking to each other. So you have these court cases that are languishing and paperwork that is being produced and families that are paying, all this money. And anyway, this happened to this family, and this is the wife who's a U.S. citizen, but her husband is from Honduras, and he had a construction company here because he was going through the asylum process, but it hadn't been completed yet. So he'd started a construction company, they had a family, and that's her FaceTiming with him, and he's helping her run his construction company now. Lots of stories on schools of hope. We did a big investigation with the Bradenton Herald again on the proliferation of these strip mall casinos that are hiding in plain sight and why it's been so hard for law enforcement to crack down on them, and how as soon as they do, they seem to pop up just down the street or sometimes in the same place. We do some profile pieces as well. This is a gal who had been brutally stabbed by her estranged fiance and survived it, and then turned that trauma into a nonprofit where she helps other women of domestic violence. And so you might be wondering, well, why am I doing this? Why is my team doing this and not the traditional media outlets themselves? And obviously that is because traditional media outlets have suffered a pretty severe economic blow. I've been in newspapers since the 90s, which is wild because I was only born in 95. And the change has been dramatic. I mean, my first job was in college, where I was a night news clerk for the St. Paul Pioneer Press, and we were in this huge building downtown. We occupied every floor, and as the night news clerk, one of my jobs was at about 11 o'clock. I'd take the company car down to the press building and pick up the first run of newspapers, bring them back, and I would distribute them to the editors and the copy desk. And at 11 o'clock at night, that newsroom was still packed. It just never stopped. Now the St. Paul Pioneer Press is, no longer in that building. It is a fraction of the staff. I doubt they have night news clerks or company cars these days. It is just a radical shift, and obviously we've seen that here in our community as well. Just some statistics on the industry. Just in the past 20 years alone, the nation has lost 3/4 of the number of journalists that we had at the turn of the century. So there are far fewer of us doing this work. Newsrooms have closed nationwide. Last year alone, 130 newsrooms closed. That's just in 1 year. It's happening at a staggering rate. And even in communities where the newsrooms haven't closed, again, like the St. Paul Pioneer Press, it's just it's nothing compared to what it was. And when I moved here in 2015 to take a job at the Sarasota Herald Tribune, I joined their investigations team, which had already won a Pulitzer, and the year I joined had won another Pulitzer, had been a Pulitzer finalist numerous times. We worked in this beautiful glass building downtown Main Street, and it was a fantastic experience. And today, the Sarasota Herald Tribune is in a bank building next door. There are 12 people in the newsroom total, and circulation has just gone off of a cliff. It's not just the Herald Tribune, it's the Bradenton Herald as well. And look, this is not the fault of the journalists who are still really trying to do their best, but Bradenton Herald is owned by McClatchy, Sarasota Herald Tribune is owned by Gannett. These are huge chains, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn by saying they're squeezing as much profit out of these organizations as they can and managing their demise. As long as they can make a buck, these places will stay open. Journalists today are just like journalists when I got into the field after college. They're eager, they want to tell stories, they want to serve their community, but it's really hard to serve a community when there used to be 150 people covering a community and now there are 12. The Bradenton Herald, I think, has about the same number of reporters. You can't cover it all. They're doing a really good job covering the breaking news, and they're trying to dig a little bit, but without those resources, you just can't do the type of work that you were able to do 20 years ago, which again is why we try to do that really hard stuff that takes a lot of time and resources, like investigations, like that Manatee teacher's investigation that took us 4 months to do. And that's just an enormous amount of time that most organizations can't afford anymore. And so that's where we come in. The result of that loss of reporting power, and look, I'm not saying that reporters are all great and every newspaper is great. I grew up in a house that got a newspaper every day and remember more than once my dad crumpling it up and tossing it in the trash and saying words that I won't repeat. But at least we got it. At least they were there, and you might not have agreed with it, but if they got something wrong, they ran a correction. And they were at the council meetings and the commission meetings, and people knew that they were watching. And sometimes you can stop corruption just by paying attention to what people are doing, and they know that you're there. And all that has sort of been lost. And so corruption does flourish when nobody's watching. And it's not just journalists. I've gone to enough city commission meetings to know it's me and two old guys in the back. No offense to old guys, but we all have jobs. We're all working full time, and it's our job as reporters to be at those meetings so you can go teach class and work at the bank and be a doctor or a judge. That is our job, and we're not doing it. There's not a lot of people stepping up to do it. League of Women Voters notwithstanding, they have an amazing observer corps filling that gap. But you've got misinformation, you've got political division, and community voices are silenced. Add to that attacks on the First Amendment, which I want to mention because this is a really dicey environment right now for anybody to be a reporter. Just in this past year alone, we've had a series of events that have made it really difficult for reporters to do our jobs. A lot of these that are detailed here on the screen are national. Trump banning the Associated Press from the White House because they continue to refer to the body of water just west of us as the Gulf of Mexico, despite his changing it to the Gulf of America. They did so because they serve an international audience, and internationally that body of water is still referred to as Gulf of Mexico. You've had the Department of Defense ban media organizations who refuse to sign a policy, basically deferring their editorial judgment to the Department of Defense. Even Fox News refused to sign it. Trump suing numerous news organizations for coverage that he deems undesirable or unfair, cuts to PBS and NPR, and then, of course, the FCC pressuring NBC after comments about Charlie Kirk made on late-night host Jimmy Kimmel. And all of this flows down, by the way, into Florida. Journalists here are facing, maybe not as high profile of attacks on the First Amendment, but we are definitely feeling the impacts. It is so much harder for us to get access to public meetings. For example, I have a colleague who's the executive editor of the Daytona Beach News Journal. They've written stories about the sheriff over there that he doesn't like, and so he's banned them from his press conferences. That's just stuff that had never happened before. We're being charged exorbitant fees for records. We were just charged $7,000 for records that another agency had just given us for free. We're being ignored systemically. We have to pay attorneys to intervene and ask agencies on our behalf for those records. We have to threaten to sue. We're ignored. We call politicians routinely, only to be met with silence or no comment or sorry, we can't make the senator or congressman available to you. And I just never saw these types of things 20 or 30 years ago, but it's happening and it's getting more prevalent. And so it's just really difficult for reporters to do our job. And I think a big part of that is the weakening of media organizations that once were occupied like those beautiful glass buildings downtown and had attorneys on retainer and could fight these battles and have access to information. But unfortunately, it's a different landscape today. That said, there is hope. There's been a rise in nonprofit newsrooms across the nation. I think just in the past 5 years alone, there have been 3 new nonprofit, these are all digital-first nonprofit newsrooms across the country. Mississippi Today, Honolulu Civil Beat, Cal Matters. Of course, you've got your big ones like ProPublica, which is the national investigative outlet that broke the Judge Clarence Thomas scandal, where they'd shown that he'd been taking money and favors from people who had cases before the court. Just incredible work that's happening across the board, and Suncoast Searchlight is really happy to be a part of this trend. We were started by the Bradenton Foundation, a family foundation based in Sarasota that serves Sarasota, Manatee, and DeSoto County, who saw a need in the community, and they put forth seed money and assembled a board of directors and said, go forth and create a newsroom. And so that is how we got our start. But the Bradenton Foundation gave us money to start and have a runway, but we are actively fundraising and seeking grants and trying to stay viable and have revenue coming in so that we can continue to create content for free and serve a need in this community. We also do trainings and community engagement events. This is a picture of, in the right-hand corner in the black turtleneck is Dean Baquet, former executive editor of the New York Times, who was gracious enough to come to our newsroom in November. And we invited journalists from across our 3-county area to come and hang out with Dean and get wisdom from him. And so these are folks from Bradenton Herald and WUSF and ABC7 and Sarasota Magazine and on, just in the newsroom hanging out. And even Dean said, like, this is amazing. Never in my day did I think I would see journalists from so many newsrooms together, not in a competitive, tense environment, but as friends and colleagues, which is sort of the model right now. There are so few of us that we sort of have to stay together if we're going to do good work these days. And we do community engagement events as well. That is it. I don't know if I nailed it. Was that 30 minutes? I think it was. Yes.
It's a Bradenton Kiwanis tradition to present you with a golden ruler to measure your future success.
Thank you. I
Take a
appreciate
picture
it.
here with Lemoyne.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Lots of great information. Thank you so much, Emily. All right. Brenda, I almost forgot. Brenda has a scholarship committee meeting right after this meeting, right here at this table. So if you are on the scholarship committee, meet Brenda right after. If you would like to be on the scholarship committee, meet Brenda right here at this table. All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. Please join us next week when our speaker will be Craig Warzeka with the Pirates and Marauders, and he will give us a preview of spring training and the Bradenton Marauders' upcoming schedule. All right, I hope everyone has a wonderful week. Meeting adjourned.